The idea that Linux had one biggest problem is something people argued about for years. But if you've been around the tech space long enough, you already know what kept holding it back. It wasn't power, it wasn't flexibility, and it definitely wasn't performance. Linux has always been insanely powerful. The real issue was usability and compatibility, especially for everyday users who just wanted things to work without digging through forums, typing complex commands, or worrying about whether their favorite apps would even run. And now in 2026, something major has shifted. Quietly, without a dramatic announcement, Linux has crossed a line that changes everything. For decades, Linux lived in two worlds. On one side, it dominated servers, cloud infrastructure, and supercomputers. On the other side, it struggled to win over the average desktop user. People loved the idea of it, the freedom, the customization, the open-source philosophy.
When it came to actually using it daily, friction always appeared. You'd install a distribution, get excited, and then run into small issues. Maybe your Wi-Fi driver didn't work properly, maybe your GPU wasn't fully supported, maybe your favorite editing software wasn't available, or maybe a game you wanted to play simply wouldn't launch. And those small issues added up. They created a perception problem. Linux wasn't seen as broken, but it was seen as inconvenient. It felt like something you had to learn before you could fully use. Meanwhile, other operating systems focused on simplicity. They removed friction even if that meant sacrificing control. And for most people, convenience always wins. But here's where things start to change. Over the past few years, a combination of developments has slowly erased those barriers. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't one update or one company. It was a series of breakthroughs stacking on top of each other until suddenly, Linux isn't just usable anymore, it's competitive in a way it never was before. One of the biggest shifts has been in software compatibility. This used to be the deal breaker. If you couldn't run what you needed, nothing else mattered. But now, compatibility layers and containerized apps have matured to a point where most users don't even notice them anymore. Tools like Proton and advanced virtualization systems have made it possible to run applications and games that were once locked to other platforms, and they run surprisingly well. In many cases, the performance difference is negligible and sometimes even better. Think about that for a second. The one argument people always used, "I can't switch because my apps won't work," is fading away. And once that excuse disappears, people start looking at everything else Linux offers. Then there's hardware support. This was another pain point for years. You'd install Linux and hope your components were supported. Now in 2026, hardware manufacturers are finally taking Linux seriously. Drivers are more stable, more integrated, and often included out of the box. Whether it's GPUs, Wi-Fi cards, or even specialized peripherals, the experience has become far more plug-and-play than it used to be. At the same time, distributions themselves have evolved. They've become smarter, cleaner, and more user-friendly. Installation processes are simpler, updates are smoother, and interfaces are more polished. You don't feel like you're using something unfinished anymore. You feel like you're using a modern operating system designed for real people, not just developers. But the real breakthrough, the thing that changes everything, is how Linux has solved fragmentation without losing its identity. Fragmentation used to be both a strength and a weakness. It gave users choice, but it also created confusion. Too many distributions, too many package managers, too many ways of doing the same thing. For beginners, it was overwhelming. Now, thanks to universal packaging formats and better standardization, that chaos has been reduced. Applications can be installed in a consistent way across different distributions. Developers don't have to worry as much about targeting multiple environments, and users don't have to think about which version of Linux they're running just to install something simple. This might sound like a small change, but it's huge. It removes one of the biggest mental barriers for new users. It makes Linux feel cohesive instead of scattered. And while all of this is happening, something even bigger is going on in the background. The entire tech industry is shifting. Privacy concerns are growing. Subscription fatigue is real. People are tired of being locked into ecosystems that control what they can and can't do. And this is exactly where Linux shines. Linux doesn't just give you control, it's built around it. You decide what gets installed, what gets updated, and how your system behaves. There's no hidden tracking, no forced updates, no lockdown environment. In a world where users are starting to care more about ownership and transparency, that's a powerful advantage. Another factor driving this change is performance efficiency. Linux has always been lightweight compared to other operating systems, but now that advantage is becoming more relevant. As hardware gets more diverse, from powerful desktops to low-power devices, having an OS that can scale efficiently is a big deal. Linux can run smoothly on older machines while also taking full advantage of high-end hardware. That flexibility is hard to match. And let's talk about gaming for a moment, because this used to be the ultimate barrier. If you were a gamer, Linux wasn't even a consideration. But now, that narrative is changing fast. With improved compatibility layers, better driver support, and growing developer interest, gaming on Linux is no longer a joke. It's a viable option. You can install a distribution, launch your favorite platform, and just play. No complicated setup, no endless tweaking. When you combine all of these changes, you start to see the bigger picture. Linux didn't just fix one problem, it solved a network of problems that were all connected. Usability, compatibility, fragmentation, hardware support, they all improved together. And that's what makes this moment different. This isn't just another year of the Linux desktop prediction, this feels more real. Not because Linux suddenly became perfect, but because it reached a tipping point. The experience is now good enough that the advantages start to outweigh the drawbacks for a lot of people. And once that shift happens, growth becomes natural. More users lead to more developers paying attention. More developers lead to better apps. Better apps attract even more users. It becomes a cycle, and Linux is finally in a position to benefit from it. What's even more interesting is how this affects the future of operating systems as a whole. The traditional model of tightly controlled platforms is starting to feel outdated. People want flexibility, they want transparency. They want systems that work for them, not the other way around, and Linux represents that idea better than anything else. So when we say Linux solved its biggest problem, it's not just about fixing bugs or improving performance. It's about removing friction. It's about making the experience accessible without sacrificing power. It's about reaching a point where switching no longer feels like a risk. In 2026, that point has finally arrived. And whether you're a developer, a gamer, a student, or just someone who uses a computer every day, this shift matters. Because it gives you a real choice. Not a compromise, not an experiment, but a genuine alternative that stands on its own. And once people realize that, everything changes.